Nadine.
Hello.
So happy that you're here on Books and Bindings. I'm so sorry that Jordan is not able to make it, but she's here in spirit. Yeah, we're so happy you're here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. Sending love to Jordan.
Yay, this is so exciting. Yeah, so thrilled. And we're just gonna jump right in and start with some fun facts so our viewers get to kind of know some, yeah, interesting things about you before we talk about your books and writing. So,
Okay.
some fun facts about Nadine is she is partially colorblind, with warm colors and seems to be drawn mostly to cool toned book covers.
Mm-hmm.
It's really cool because holding up your books here, I'm like, I can see that.
Yes, yes. All except for Romanov.
Yes, yes, Romanoff has some red in there.
I like to say it's my extroverted book. All the rest are introverts.
I can see that. No, I love it. She loves to cook and she's not fond of baking though, unless it's bread. Bread is great.
Yes.
Bread is always the exception.
Agreed. I'm just not the cupcake person.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Um, she has never cried reading or writing a book. Wow,
Yep. I'm a cyborg.
you're not real. That's
I know.
amazing. Oh my gosh. I need some of that. I feel like I'm too emotional, like in my life sometimes. So that I need some of your cyborgness. Wow, okay, you are a certified scuba diver, um,
Hmm.
which interprets to mean that she's destined to write a pirate book someday.
Yes. I'm like, I can't have experienced all of this sea life for nothing. It needs to go in a book someday. I just haven't had that story yet.
That's so fun. Well, I'm all about pirates. I love pirate stories and I love the ocean. So, um, I would definitely read that book.
Yeah.
And then the last one is you once dressed up as Professor Trelawney from Harry Potter, um, so thoroughly that your own agent and friends did not recognize you.
Yes. I was at a conference and I'm telling you, it was like the most relaxed costume event I'd ever been at because no one was like stopping me to talk to me because nobody knew who I was.
Hey, that's perfect. It's like going undercover, but like in the best way possible.
Yes, yes.
I love it. I love it so much. I feel like I've gotten a glimpse into your personality a little even more, which is awesome. So, yeah, so for our viewers, Nadine has written 6 books with her seventh coming out this June,
July.
July, July.
Yes. Mhm.
Which is so exciting. We're gonna talk about that eventually in some of the questions, but yes, make sure you pre-order. But I've only read 2 of your books so far, Nadine. Fox is on my list, but I've only read Wistress and Romanov, which
Aw,
I loved both.
great.
And Jordan's read Wistress and loved it too. So
Good.
big fans over here.
Aw, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we're just gonna jump right into the first question.
Yeah.
So the first question is, when did you first know you wanted to be a writer?
I love this question because I don't have the typical answer. I feel like I hear of people who just wanted to be writers since they were born. And I guess there's like writing for fun and for passion, and then there's writing for publication. And I just always seemed to process things through stories. I've been a journaler since I was really, really little. And I would write stories just for fun. I never actually thought about a book getting published like all the other books out there until I was in college, which maybe sounds wild because publishing is a very accessible topic nowadays on social media. I was born before social media, and so I just never even thought of publishing. I just wrote stories because I loved imagination. And so it wasn't necessarily, well, I want to be a writer. I just wrote, and I'd share stories with my siblings. And then I had this one book idea, and this was because I also grew up before young adult fiction was a genre. So all I really had that was clean were, Narnia Harry Potter came out when I was an early teen, and Christian romances and things like that. And I thought, I want an adventure book. I want something with just traveling and adventure, another Hobbit, and I couldn't find it other than the Hobbit and Narnia. And so I thought, well, I'll just write it because it's so easy to just be the next Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, obviously. And so I started writing a story, and it took me 7 years to draft it. I finished it when I was in college. And that was when I thought, oh, maybe I could get it published, because I had another friend who wrote, and she invited me to go to a writing conference with her. And so I went to my very first writing conference. I was 17. And that was the first time that I ever even thought of the concept of like, oh, a book could get published. I don't know why my camera's doing that. That's weird.
I was like, woo.
I know. Oh, something my non-tech savvy brain has no idea how to turn off.
All right.
That's okay. So that's kind of how I started as a writer, was just enjoying storytelling and not thinking of it as some big career pursuit or publication pursuit, which I think for my personality, it's really good that I was able to just do it as a passion before the pressure or idea of getting published even entered my mind.
I think that's beautiful. I love that, especially because it feels authentic, Not to say if you're writing for publication purposes only, it's not authentic, but
Right.
it stems from like your desire for adventure and just for good storytelling, and like that's a beautiful experience. I think that's so cool.
Yes, I'm very thankful for it.
Yeah, and it's such a good like foundation to begin your writing career on, I think, too.
Because I have all of these years of writing under my belt without that mindset of publication. So I know what it looks like to be able to set that pressure aside and just enjoy the writing process. Whereas I think because the publishing world is so loud and accessible nowadays, it's harder for young authors to even turn that off, even if they wanted to be able to just focus on the craft and the enjoyment of it. And so I always encourage writers, like, if you can, try and silence those voices. But I did not have the battle and the noise that they have these days.
Yeah, and I feel like so unique and needed, and an encouragement, I hope, for other people who are listening to be like, wow, like it's possible, It
Yes,
doesn't have to
yes.
be just this machine driving you all the time. So yeah, that's so encouraging.
Yeah. Oh,
Um, and so I guess this kind of goes on to the question that you answered, but we didn't get the title, so maybe not. What is the first story you ever wrote, and was it the first story you published?
so the first story I ever wrote was not my first published book. It had this grand, catchy title called The Quest of the 700. It was very like, 700 what? We don't know. It was, I started that when I was a teenager. And it was kind of the typical, I like to call it the typical zero novel, where you're learning how to write, or you're just even learning how to finish a book. And it has 12 points of view and all of these just random things. They're sailing across the sea, this is boring whirlpool, sucks in the pirate ship to an underground world, of course. So I really just, my imagination like barfed all over that story, and I loved it. I loved just being wildly imaginative without logic involved.
The
um,
best.
and it was just a wonderful time writing it. And it will never be published because it's not a strong enough concept to, in my opinion, I don't think it's a strong enough concept to really carry a good story. It was a good journey for me. My siblings love it just because I have nice siblings who are like, oh, this was fun. I'm like, yeah, but you were 9 when you read it. So of course you liked it. It's just adventure with nothing that makes sense. So that was my zero novel. It's still dear to my heart because I learned so much from it, and I'm okay with it not ever going into the hands of readers. I don't think it was meant for other readers. It was meant for me. And then my books after that, my second book that I wrote was A Time to Die, which is up whoop, there on my shelf, which was my debut novel and the first one that got published.
Okay. That's so cool. I love that you have that in your arsenal, just in your back pocket. Like, I wrote
Yes.
this story that no one will ever see.
Yes.
But I feel like we all have those, whether it's just little stories here and there or a full-blown novel, you're like, nope, no one is going to
Yes.
publish this ever. Um, but it's definitely nice to have that as like another foundational, like pivotal point of like, okay, I wrote it, got it out. Now I'm gonna, embark on another writing journey. So,
Yes.
um,
Yes.
and I think for the next question, I think you may have answered this somewhere in like one of your reels that you did on Instagram, but
Oh, mhm.
I'm not 100% sure. What was the hardest story that you've written and why?
Okay, that I have to grab it now. Oh, the hardest book for me to write was Fox. And there's a long story behind it, but so this is a historical fantasy about the son of Guy Fawkes, who was part of the gunpowder plot, this part of history where they tried to blow up the King of England. And so his son gets involved in the plot, and there's magic, and it's fun. But I that was the first book that I wrote after my trilogy. So my first books ever written were a trilogy, which means I was in the same world, the same characters' heads for 3 books, which for me, the first book took me 4 years to write. So I was just in that world and those characters for 7 years. And then I got a book contract with Thomas Nelson, HarperCollins, and they specifically asked me for a historical fantasy. And I was very new to publishing, and I just thought like, oh, sure, I could come up with something like that. This seems like a good next step and for publishing. And so I signed a contract, but I didn't realize how hard it was going to be to get myself out of this other story world that I had been in for so long. And I had never written anything other than The Quest for the 700, so I didn't know how to write a standalone. I didn't know how to write anything historical. And it felt a bit like I was writing this book for the market instead of like a heart book or a passion book. I was writing it for the publisher because this was my shoe into publishing with a bigger publisher, opening up doors for me. And I don't think that there was anything wrong with that, with signing a contract with that purpose. And the Lord really worked through that. But it was a book of obedience. That's what I like to say, not of passion. God made it very clear to me in different ways that, okay, this is the book that you're going to write. And I did not love it. I had no inspiration for it. Every single word was just like pulling out teeth. I was convinced it was the worst thing that I had ever written. And it's one of those like, I'm not just saying this, it really is, because people are like, oh, well, it's probably better than you think. I'm like, no, it wasn't. It was the worst thing that I'd ever written. And through that process of writing with no passion, which any writer is always like, how do you write when you don't have motivation or you don't have inspiration? Like, you have to write anyway. And that was the entire process of this book for me. I had tiny, tiny little nuggets of inspiration here and there, but for the most part, it was just, I'm writing it because I have to write it. But I wrote it with the Lord. And that book really taught me what it looked like to be faithful when I didn't feel like it, and to invite God in. And he was so faithful with this book. Anytime I hit writer's block, okay, Lord, where am I going to take this story? What do I do next? And he would always give me a little spurt of inspiration of like, take it here. Here's where you should twist the plot. And it kind of became a joke between me and him because he did it so much. I'm like, okay, you're going to do it again today? What do I write next? And he would answer that prayer. So it was a really beautiful journey in the end. But it was very difficult while writing it. And finally, once it was through most of the editing process, I really fell in love with the story. So I got there eventually, but the drafting process, I was not there. And to draft a book without your heart is really, really hard. But it's possible with the Lord, and then he can bless that. And I'm so, so proud of this book, and I love it dearly for so many reasons. But I hope I do not have to go through another writing process like that.
Yeah, I mean, talk about discipline and relying on the Lord a lot. Like that's such a good growing experience. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and and it's interesting because like readers will not see that side of the
Hmm.
struggle. They'll just see the fruits of your efforts. So it's neat to kind of get the backside of like all the toil it took to create something like this. Um,
Yes.
which it's yeah, it's hard, but it's so rewarding after. So it's really great you can look back and see where the Lord brought you and how you've grown. That's cool.
Yes. And it's really exciting when a reader tells me it's their favorite book of the books I've written. So I'm like, that's the Lord.
Yeah, yeah, so true. So true. Well, speaking of favorite books, what is or what was or is present or past tense the favorite story that you have written and why?
So, my favorite book to write, or at least the most positive writing experience, was the second book in my trilogy. It's called The Time to Speak. I think, oh, I don't think it's down there. But for me, I knew where I wanted to take that book. I knew most of the plot. I'm not a plotter or an outliner. So I had it all in my head, and the world was already established. The characters were already established in book one. And I felt like I'd spent 4 years in book one trying to finish it, knowing what's going to happen next, but not getting to write it. And so I actually spent all those years fine tuning the story in my head. And then when I finally got to write it, it was just pure fun, like a romp through imagination to write
Mhm.
that book. And that's where I felt like I really got to give some characters the screen time that they deserved and show how amazing they are, when readers didn't totally understand how amazing they were yet. In book one, like these characters were all waiting, like, when's it my turn? And this was finally their turn. And it's also the first book that I wrote married. I met my husband while I was drafting A Time to Die. And he was obviously a big inspiration to the romance in those books, because what happens when you're living through a romance? You want to write it. And so I wrote a lot of that in, to the romance thread that goes through the series. And so that was really special to me. So book two was just, it was all fun. I mean, not every minute, but the majority of it was just fun and life giving. And I think that it came out just the best that it possibly could. I'm very, very proud of that book. And I feel like I avoided the sagging sequel syndrome, with
Yep.
trilogies where there's like this great book one and then like book two and then book three is great. Well, I personally think my second book is better than my first. So if anybody likes my first book, I think they'll like the second one even more. If anyone doesn't like the first book, I'm like, give the second one a try anyway, because I think it'll redeem things for you.
That's great. I love that. And it's also really cool to hear that you're not a plotter and that you don't outline.
No.
Because that's also my brain too. So it's encouraging to be like, oh, Nadine can do it. So I guess like what I'm doing is okay too.
Yes, it absolutely is. We all have our own process. I like to say outliners and plotters have more to talk about, like before they are writing, because they have like all the stuff that they can show you. Whereas we're like, we can't show you our brains.
Yep.
So it's just all in our brains there, and it's messy. And eventually it's gonna look pretty.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think you already answered that question then, like, what is your writing process like, plotter, pantster, or plantster?
Oh yes.
Yeah, so you would say you're not a plotter, but maybe do you feel like you fall in between pantsing and plantsing sometimes, like semi-plots, like occasionally, or more just fly by the seat of your pants, like completely?
So I don't fly by the seat of my pants completely. I like to say I'm just a brain plotter. I have the plot and the story in my head until my head is too full to fit any more plotting. And then I write. Instead of writing an outline, I write the story. And then when I get stuck, I wait until my brain fills back up with ideas and plot and connecting the dots, and then I pour it back out on paper. So I guess I'd probably be a plantser, but I don't do any sort of physical outline. It's literally all in my head, which scares me sometimes because my brain's not reliable. I know
Same.
I'm going to forget things. Yeah. And I'm like, well, what if I forget something important? But I have learned anytime I tried outlining or plotting on paper, it's fun when I do it, but I literally never look at it again, ever. And then it gets a little bit less fun because I feel like, well, if I'm going to be discovering the story in this outline, I might as well be writing it. And so it just doesn't work for me. And I have very often wished it worked for me, but it doesn't work for me, and that's fine.
Yep. No, I think that's great too. And I love your confidence in it that you're just like, nope,
Yeah.
you don't need that. This
Yeah,
is what
I
this
tried
is.
it and I learned, and there we
Yeah.
go. So if someone doesn't know if they're a plotter or a pantser, try both ways, see what you like, see what you don't like, and then find your groove.
Yeah. And I think that's so like beneficial for writers to hear. Just because I feel like there could be pressure in the writing
Yes.
process to be like, oh, I have to do it this way, or there's all these different tips and tricks. And it's like, yeah, but it doesn't have to be as complicated as we make it. I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes it can be a lot more simplified if we don't freak out.
Yes. Yes, I agree.
That's great. So I have one more question before we get into talking about your newest book coming out. I just want to know, who are some of your literary influences?
Okay, so it kind of there are different literary influences who influence different parts of my life. Um, Tolkien and C.S. Lewis gave me the passion for reading. And so then that opened the door to all of these other books and imagination. Harry Potter was a huge influence on me because I was very awkward when I was young. I didn't have friends. So I was very Harry, like Harry Potter, in that just I was weird. I was a weirdo and didn't
Me
have
too.
I didn't have the group of friends. I was never cool. Um, and so I resonated with that. And those books came at a time in my life that was very lonely. And so I found friendship through story. But then also, I read them to my younger siblings as they grew up. So it grew my friendships in real life through my siblings. And so we just bonded over over a fantasy series. And that's when I started to see how fantasy could still impact your life, because it impacted my life instead of it just being entertainment.
Mhm.
um and then of course the themes of light always wins, hope, love, just they're very strong in that series. Then I read by Jill Williamson, the Blood of Kings series, which this is an underrated series. It was the first Christian fiction, aside from like C.S. Lewis, that I can remember read, first Christian fantasy, speculative fiction that I had ever read. And it just exploded my faith. And I had never experienced fiction and faith going hand in hand in that way. So that's what made me then want to write in the speculative fiction realms, but Christian, from a Christian worldview, because it was so powerful for me that I had just never experienced anything like that. And those were kind of my main influences, because they grew my reading and my friendships, and then also my faith, and those all together are what influenced how I decided to write, what I wanted to write, who I wanted to write for, and all of that.
That's great. I love that. It's so awesome. And so now we're heading into talking about your newest book coming out this July, The Nightmare Virus, which is just, it sounds astounding and amazing in every way. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about it? Like, where did the initial ideas come from? How are you feeling about its release? I mean, it's a loaded question, but just spill whatever you want about the Nightmare Virus.
Okay, yes, despite this super ominous title, there really is no other title for this book. My publisher and I tried. So, The Nightmare Virus. I'm still a little like self-conscious about it, because when I say it, I'm like, oh, I don't think I could ever say this to like the mom of teens. Like, what should my teenager read? Oh, my book, The Nightmare Virus. But I'm getting used to it. I'm getting used to it. Um, so that story idea came to me years and years ago, before I had even finished my Out of Time series. And the concept of the story is that there's a virus where when you fall asleep, you and everybody else who has caught this virus, when you fall asleep, you enter like a universal dream world. So it's almost like an alternate universe. And the main character is trying to find a cure in real life, but at the same time, when he's in this nightmare world, he's trying to create a new life for him there, because once you are infected, you get more, you only have 22 days until you're asleep forever. And so you're in the nightmare world forever. So he's trying to navigate, well, I want to find a cure to get to stop this, but also if I can't stop it, that's going to be my of the story. I got that. Let's see. I'm trying to even remember the origin of this idea. But when I was in college, I used to have a lot of very vivid dreams, a lot of nightmares. And I think it was a mixture of, going through kind of that awkward growth time of life where you're figuring out who you are on your own and having a vivid imagination and trying to process things through story. And because I couldn't always process it on paper, my brain processed it when I slept. And I had a lot of negative dreams. And so I would always think, wouldn't it be nice if I could fight them somehow? And I would take it to the Lord. And over the course of several years of this, I had to come to terms with the fact that I don't have control over where my brain's going to go when I'm asleep. But I do have control over how I'm going to trust the Lord through that. And I think just that multiple year long season of my life led to processing that part of my life through a story, the nightmare virus, and what it would look like to have to let go of our idea of what reality should look like. And is there still hope in something that seems so dark? So that's kind of the concept of it. I'm really, really excited for people to read it because it also has fun elements, despite the title. It has a hope thread, and a lot of the early readers have really enjoyed it, which has been really encouraging because it's a very different book than my other books, and even a different voice than my other books. And I was like, hey, Lord, different could be good or bad, but the story is what the story is, and I've written it as faithfully as possible. And I'm really, really excited for people to finally get to read it.
That's so awesome. I'm just anticipating it so much. Like, I couldn't wait to pre-order. Like I said, I love your writing. So
Thank you.
yeah, no, you're welcome. It's so exciting. I feel like, you know, writing in different genres is great because I feel like it allows readers to see different aspects of the author's heart and different aspects of the author's uh, uh, not prowess, writing ability. I don't know, whatever
Yes.
the word is, which is really cool. So yeah, I just can't wait for. I mean, it's only a few short months away. That's not too
I
far.
know. I know.
So exciting. Yay. Well, we look forward to that. Everyone who's listening, make sure you pre-order. If you haven't already, there will be a link in the little description thing below on YouTube. So that's exciting. Okay, and then for this next question, I feel like you already touched upon it a little bit, but I guess a little bit more in depth. How does your faith impact your writing?
I mean, our writing comes from who we are. Our writing toolbox is not the craft books that we've read. It's the life that we've lived. That's where our words come from. That's where our thoughts come from. And that's where our emotions come from. And my faith is central to who I am. My relationship with the Lord dictates everything that I do. And not in a like dictator sort of way, but that in a passionate sort of way. I'm passionate about Jesus. I'm passionate about the Bible being the word of God and truth. And so every life choice that I make, my parenting, my pursuits, my publishing, my writing, everything comes from that. And I was very blessed to grow up in a Christian home under two very faithful to the Lord, Bible believing parents. And so my entire life has just grown from this beautiful soil of God's word, not without its struggles, but because of that, And because that's where my words come from, my worldview is naturally going to weave itself into my writing. Even if I were to decide to write something like, well, I want to write something totally without a faith thread or separated from faith. I don't know why I would ever do something like that. But let's say I wanted to, I would not be capable of it because the words and emotions and my very imagination don't know how to separate themselves from that, my faith in the Lord. And God, I mean, this is a soapbox that I'm very passionate about, so I'll try not to like talk forever. But God is the ultimate creator, and not only did He create us, He created the idea of creating. He created imagination. He created inspiration, and no, and we are made in His image. So, like, you literally cannot separate it from the Lord, and which is really exciting because whenever I'm afraid I'm going to ruin a story, or a story is not going to have enough purpose, or it's not going to affect people, or it's just going to be nothing but entertainment, which to me is not why I write. I want my books to help grow and change lives. God can still supersede that. So my faith impacts my writing just because of who I am. And I'm very, very thankful for that. God's been so faithful. And I invite Him into the writing process for every book. And I like to say, like, there's perfectionist tendencies in all of us writers. And the only way to have a perfect book is to have a perfect co-author, and God is my co-author. And so all of the gaps and cracks that I leave in my stories, which there are many, He is going to fill them in or shine light through them in His perfect way and affect our readers that way.
So. Beautiful. There's nothing more to add to that. I'm just like, yep. Yes. That's great. No, thank you for sharing that part of your heart. And yeah, it's so encouraging and so true. When we invite the Lord in, it's just, I mean, it's beautiful. It's how it should be. So
exactly. It changes everything.
It does. It really does. So that's so encouraging. And so with just the limited time we have left, I just have one last question. Is there anything else you'd like your readers or viewers to know about you at all?
Oh man, I don't know.
I know it's kind of it's like a loaded. How do you answer that?
I guess just that everything I do is as real and authentic as I can be, and I'm not fake. And things that I share online are truly, truly from my heart. And so, if anything is resonating with a reader or a viewer, whether it's my books or social media, it's as genuine as I can possibly be. And so I hope that you will take those things to heart. And I love getting to know my readers and viewers. I'm awful, awful, awful. And Alyssa will attest to this. I'm awful at responding to emails and DMs because my life with my 4 little children who are 5 years and younger is very go, go, go. And I can't keep up with those things. And I'm learning to slowly let them go. Letting go of the guilt I feel of all of the unresponded to messages. But I do read them, and I do care about them, and I pray for my readers very often. So I just hope that anybody who tries to contact me and doesn't hear from me doesn't think it's because I don't care about you. This went off of a weird little rabbit trail. So I'm just trying to say I care about my readers and my viewers, and I hope that that you know that I care about you so much, and I'm praying for you and your writing process if you're a writer, or your motherhood process if you're a mother, or just life if you're a college student or a younger student, or anything. There is such richness to be found with relationship with the Lord, and that's what I pray over everybody that God puts in my path through this publishing process.
That's beautiful. And I think anyone who encounters you, and whether it's through your posts or verbally or messaging, they can see your heart and know that you care genuinely for people, and you're as authentic as it gets, which is great, so you don't have to worry about that. Even missed messages or whatever, however long goes by, people know your heart because it is very beautiful. So
thank you. That's very kind of you.
Yeah, well, this has been such a blessed time. It's been so great getting to know you more and just hearing your heart as an author, as a reader, as a mother, as a child of God, just all the above. It's just so cool. And I know our viewers will be so encouraged by you. So Thank you again for coming on Books and Bindings. And yeah, this was just so fun.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I loved being able to talk writing and reading and the Lord and just and our stories, our stories.
Yeah, it's great. All the above. It's so good. So, well, until next time, Nadine, we will sign off here and yeah, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.